So this is really very basic, and I think this is the way you can have the slides, of course, and look at it and design it afterwards for your own purposes. But I think the most important thing is, first of all, to know your own objectives, know what you want to achieve. You know, what is it that you want from the government? And there are probably many things that you want, but then you will have to select them based on what is the most impactful for patients or the most urgent thing to address. And I think it's very important to be crystal clear about what it is that you want and translate it in such a way that it's also understandable for a politician and workable for them. Secondly, know what is on the agenda of the politicians. I mean, everything has a framework. Everything, you have to find a way in which it matches the expectations of what the politicians are working on. And that is, you know, longer big health activities, sustainable development goals. WHO has a number of targets, for instance, that 80% of all citizens should have access to treatments for non-communicable diseases by 2030. So these are very clear, broad picture health targets that were subscribed to by all the member states of WHO. So they're part of the Sustainable Development Goals and the health plans. That's a good framework to start from to tell your story, because it helps them reach their agenda. There's an EU health plan, which all the member states subscribed. There are very clear messages from all the member states subscribed also for cancer treatment in the European Union, also to have national cancer plans. So these are all broader topics that are quite relevant for you to put your messages specific to lymphoma in. Third, do an environmental scan. And has nothing to do with the environment. This is just jargon to say, know what's happening in the external environment. Who is doing what in the topics that are of interest for you. So it also means understanding, you know, what are the biggest things that are going to happen in the policy environment. Who else is working on new health plans? If there's elections next year, what are the visions of the new health minister for the future? And what can you do to intervene? What are other organizations doing? What are their plans? You know, what is the vision of the insurers moving forward? So these are all topics that is very important to understand. The whole puzzle, all the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle have to fit together, and you can say, okay, our part, you know, can be integrated there. In the environmental scan, you also have a timing. You know, what is happening? What are the good moments for us to intervene? You know, when are elections happening? When are for instance, the European Council of Health Ministers coming together? Because these are moments when big decisions and declarations are made and things are signed. So make sure you know exactly when these meetings are happening. It can be because there's a big WHO meeting on cancer. So that's a milestone that should be part of that. And then, of course, you have medical congresses that are happening when new data come out, and it's very high on the agenda, and not politicians, but journalists are participating, so you can work through them. So all that is important for you to know in the next 2 to 3 years, what are the big moments in time that are going to happen that we can, you know, work on. And then build your case. How do you build a case? It's very easy. You look at what the situation today, and you try to define what the ideal situation is. And the situation today, as we heard from Jonathan, is have as many facts and figures available as possible. And look what's happening in an ideal environment. Suppose that everybody got access to lymphoma treatments like in the best country in Europe. Suppose that what is the country with the best overall survival rate? Which country is that? Do you know that? Yeah. Suppose that every country had the same systems as Germany or France. How many lives would we save in Europe? How many more people could we help? And how many more people in the immediate family are positively impacted by that? Because these are figures that show that there's a way forward, right? It doesn't block you from the hurdles. It shows a kind of what is possible, and what are France and Germany doing to get to that level of outcomes. So that's make arguments for patients, so obviously it's good for patients, but it's also good for society. So look at the overall impact of having so many more people alive for, having a workforce, labor productivity. I mean, in many countries we need people in the workforce. There are vacancies everywhere. And so if people die young, that's a loss for society. So you can calculate that loss. So if you can save a few thousand lives of people who are productive, that means a lot to the economy. So medical aspects, socioeconomic costs, and savings. So I've mentioned them. I mean, in our case, and I will mention that later too, we made a calculation for colon cancer. If the problem, the advantage of colon cancer is that you can do screening for it. So everybody of 50 years old can do a fecal test. So look in your poo and see whether you have the disease. If you have a positive test, you go colonoscopy. So that's a whole screening program. Breast cancer, cervical cancer, and colon cancer typically are good types of cancer for screening. The problem is that the majority of people are screened when it's already too late. So the smaller part of the patients are screened in a stage 1. So most people are screened in stage 3 to stage 4. Now the cost of a stage 2, stage 1 is €2,000 average treatment cost. Stage 4 is €40,000 average treatment cost. So in my opinion, for policymakers to say, let's invest a little bit more in screening, and that's the argument you had earlier. Let's invest in screening because it will generate significant savings afterwards. So if you extrapolate that figure from 20,000 to 40,000 average, and you would bring everybody in a stage 1, and you say we screen everybody, and we do that in a very systematic way to avoid the late stages, you would save €4 billion a year. €4 billion. Yeah? That's a significant amount of money.
In Europe?
In Europe, yes. Yes. 4, so building your case, have your facts and figures, and that is absolutely critical. Nobody else has them. And I liked what you said earlier from translating the complex scientific data into layman's language. I think you are the guardians of that. And don't rely on academics to do that. I mean, some of them can do it, but most of them are absolutely incapable of doing it. I mean, they understand what they are saying, but we don't. And I think also, if you know medical journalists, it's very good to use medical journalists to translate the complex things into layman's language, also for political purposes. Network.
Stefan,
yes,
so
sure.
Some of those economic arguments, they're very complex calculations to make. So do you work with health economists or academics to get
Yes,
that?
we do work with them, but a number of them you can just extrapolate. So you can say, okay, if this was applicable in every member state, that would be the result. So there are things that you don't have to go to the most distinguished professor to do that. I think if some statistics are available, you can make the calculation country by country. Network, I mean, be where the action is. So go to events, go to roundtable meetings, make sure you are visible, that you know that's part of your getting to know people, but also to gather intelligence, because then you understand what's happening, you know what's happening, and it brings you to your environmental scan. Find allies and expert champions to support you. And we mentioned earlier, if you know politicians who've had cases in the family, these are absolutely wonderful advocates for your cause. Create visibility, and I think we've seen a wonderful example from Bulgaria there, what you can do to create visibility, to be active. And then the last one is campaign. Be there, be persistent, don't stop, never stop, keep pushing. So, in the debate, you can have a number of things. So, typically is the agenda, here on the left, the agenda is set by the political world. On the right, you can say the agenda is set by us. And either you do it on your own, or you can do it together with other partners. So I think in any campaign, you look at all the topics, all the objectives that you would like to achieve, And then you have to decide, what do we champion? What can we do on our own? And where do we work with the broader cancer patient organizations or the broader patient organization, or together with other selected groups? I think the worst place to be here, I mean, this is a little bit where Monsanto is, right? So on GMO, I mean, the agenda is set by other people, and they're pushed in the defensive. Many organizations are here because of and I think the moratorium for in Bulgaria was part of that. So the politicians set something on the agenda, it surprises you or it impacts you, and then you have to fight back and make sure that it doesn't happen. The majority of things in lobbying are there. Many companies are in the same spot. And then what you can do is then move things together. That's setting the agenda yourself, and I think that is the most important thing of government affairs. Make sure that you determine where your objectives are and that the political world listens to you. This is blocking, this is moving things forward. You can do it together with other partners, or you can do it on your own. And I think this is really the spot where you want to be. That is saying, we are going to determine what the political agenda is for our cause in the coming years. Because the academics are not going to do it. I mean, they are focused on their own thing. The hospitals are not going to do it. The oncologists are not going to do it. You have to do it. You have to say, okay, what can we do as a group to move the agenda forward on the political level? And you have to bring the academics in, you have to bring the experts in, and the hospitals and the other stakeholders. But you have to lead the debate. That's your cause. That's something that you have to work on. Lead, that means that you have to convene the meetings, build the arguments, look at the way forward. And this is a very, how would I say that? Consulting kind of document. Sorry?
You were consulting?
Yes, exactly, yes. Consulting. But basically, it's very simple. I mean, you look at what is your long-term strategy. You look at what is the ideal environment, try to describe it. You look at, what are all the others thinking, and what do they think today, and what do we want them to think? And then you decide what is going to move them from A to B. If they think it's very expensive, these new drugs, what is going to change their mind that they're not very expensive? And trust me, I mean, I'm very angry with the pharmaceutical industry because they don't manage to explain the prices of their new drugs. I think many of their drugs have significant positive impact on people and also on long-term budgets, but they don't dare to stick out their neck because they're afraid to be accused. Anyway, that's another discussion, but I think it's where we as patient organizations are the victim of. I try a lot, I work still as a consultant for a number of pharmaceutical companies, including in CAR-T, to help them build a narrative around that. But I think they're far too late to do it. And I think already many people have these ingrained notions that is incredibly expensive and that is a double or triple of what is the current treatment. And that, I mean, once people have a mindset, it's extremely difficult to change it. It's much easier to educate people who have no idea about anything than to change something that is very ingrained in their ideological and emotional framework. So anyway, so try to move stakeholders from a current mindset to the desired mindset, work on a strategy, campaign plan, implementation, and then measure the results and then adapt if needed. You can get a slide. I mean, it's useful to organize your thinking, and you can put words in all the different boxes there and see what happens. A couple of critical things here is that you map also your friends and enemies. So for every topic that you put on the table in a political environment, there are friends and foes. And you have to, and some of these have influence and some of them have no influence. And so typically what you say, well, I talked to Mr. X or Mrs. Z, and she was very responsive to what we said. I said, great, but that's effort wasted, right? You have to make sure that you address the people with the real power of influence. And so mapping them, I mean, it's a really simple exercise. You just identify who your friends are and you put them there and you say, okay, how influential are they? And so that's where you can prioritize whom to work with. So it's an interesting exercise that you can do with your board or members to identify who the real friends are. I mean, it's not that kind of rocket science. Here's a slide, not willing to appear. And then you can also do for each, once you've done that, you look at all the different, I mean, this is very high level, look at current perception, desired perception, and then you identify what argument will change your opinion. What is the single most convincing argument? Will that be a rational argument? Will be that more an emotional argument? Who will change their opinion? So who do they listen to? If I'm going to say that to them, who am I? Maybe they will not believe me because I don't have the credentials. So maybe you need, an academic to work with you and go to the minister to put some weight on the table and how will their opinion be changed? Is it sufficient to have a policy paper, or do we have to chain ourselves to the gate of the parliament or, invade the parliament? So these are all topics that you can discuss and see what the possibilities are. And then hopefully it will change the perception. And not everybody is receptive to the same kind of message. Consultants and quadrants. This basically, sorry, the typeface, the font is a little bit smaller. So basically what you can do is, traditionally people inform, and they think informing them about our viewpoint is sufficient. We put it on our website. I mean, we sent out a press release. I mean, we have a report saying this, that, and the other. So it's great, that's informing. I mean, this is something that you broadcast unilaterally without any knowledge whether anybody actually reads it or listens to it, let alone act on it. So this is something that is not, oops, sorry for that. No, it will come. So this is unilateral, input oriented. So just communicating, putting stuff on your website is great, and it's needed, but it's insufficient, right? The second thing is that you have to do something multilateral, is go meet people, build relationships, go see them, or go to receptions and have a drink with them, whatever. The third is unilateral, outcomes oriented. That's campaigning. That's hammering down the same message again and again and again. It's a kind of the political power play which we heard from Bulgaria. It's opposition against majority. Make sure that you have the majority vote on your side. And it's a power play. I mean, it doesn't matter that 20% are against you or 30% are against you, as long as the majority is in favor of you. And that's, you will make enemies when you campaign, but I think the end result is there. And then the last part is to have a multilateral outcomes-oriented thing, and I think this is the most important one, that's shaping the environment. Don't wait, because when you campaign, you're trying to redress a situation that is not good. Shaping something is taking really the time to set it up. I mean, and we heard it before, setting up multi-stakeholder roundtables is really a nice thing to do. So bring all the people relevant to your domain together and have some thought leadership of what needs to be done moving forward. And I think, and then you can come with a priority where everybody is in agreement that needs to be done. And that makes it extremely difficult for politicians in power to ignore that. Because if the patients and the doctors and the hospitals and the nurses and the screening agencies and whoever you are in favor of it, well, they cannot say no, or at least much more difficult. And I think these are, increasingly set up. So maybe there's a kind of there will be too many in the future. But shaping that, working together, showing the direction, giving it a sense of purpose is really critical. And that may take a number of years. And this is really longer term than this. That's very easy. Just send out a press release. This takes time and years, so be realistic in what you can achieve by what time. And don't misunderstand me, all four are relevant and all four are important. But I think you have to not do everything here, but make sure that it's balanced and really think about that. What can we change in 10 years from now or in 5 years from now? And who needs to be involved to change that and create that ideal environment? It's a very positive, constructive way of thinking. And then you have to move the politicians along. And I think that's the difference between policy and politics. So policy is very rational. You know, these are the thick reports from WHO and the European Commission, which write in detail everything that needs to be done. Nobody reads that apart from very few people who are really professionally active and also rationally interested in the topic. So it's about arguments, facts, it's balanced, and very often about the elites. You really have to know the full context even to be able to understand these reports. Policy is totally different. Politics is different. I mean, that's about messages, it's about feeling, it's about victory and defeat, and it's about something that resonates in the public. So these are two levels on which you have to work, and make sure that you work on both levels. If it's too rational and if it's nice policy papers, very few, it will not have the necessary impact. You have to work on the emotional level, you have to work on what makes people tick. I mean, this is one of my favorite slides because it's very simple. And you can use it in every context. It's also for internal communication or whatever. If you want some people to do something, they have to know a number of things, and they have to feel something. And the most important thing is not do. And typically, most associations, but also in companies, I mean, in the pharma companies that I worked with, it was, make sure that the doctor prescribes. And you have to make sure that the HTA agency gives a positive opinion and that European Medicines Agency approves. So you go to these people and you want them to do something. And you say, you have to do that. So the only time when you meet these people is when you ask them, you have to do something. And it reminds me of a family member who only calls you when they need money, for instance. Yeah? You cannot have a trusted relationship with that person because they only know me when they need money, right? It's the same with the pharmaceutical industry. They have, well, not always, but typically. So they only go to people when they need them. Do this for me, do that for me. Secondly, as I said, the majority of the people they approach, or we approach in general, lack the knowledge to understand why they do it. So the whole concept of pricing, intellectual property rights, and other stuff in pharma is totally insufficiently explained here. So never assume that the people you approach understand the bigger picture. You know the bigger picture because that's your job, that's your expertise, that's your area of knowledge. So make sure that you don't make too many assumptions. Make sure that people understand the bigger picture of what you're trying to tell them. And the most important thing is the feel one. So I said 50%, I mean, these are quick calculations, but I think the half of the weight of what you try to achieve should have an emotional component. Why? Because that's where the energy is. If you want people to act and do something, you have to feel their energy. And how do you get energy in people? That's because the emotional drive. And the emotional drive can be because of a very, very positive thing, very aspirational, and say, well, we have a great plan here. We will reduce the number of patients with lymphoma with X% by 2025, for instance. So we're going to save X thousands of lives every year. Fantastic. Who's against that? Nobody can be against that. And how are we going to do that? Yes, you have to understand it's going to be complex. You have to do a number of things, and we'll come back to you to be very specific about that. But you need this energy first. Whoa, is that possible? Are you sure? Can that be done? Yes, that can be done. Let's do it together. Aspirational, be there. The second, what are the feelings if you have? Indignation, right? It can also be negative. Negatives gives a lot of energy. You can say, so many people are dying today who should have been alive. That's unacceptable. I mean, with the technology you have, I mean, the moratorium you mentioned, that's immoral, right? So it gives a lot of energy to fight against that. And so you have to, when you think about your campaign plan, think about your government affairs, think about what makes you angry. What drives you to make things happen. And what in your messages can drive other people to be with you. Yeah? What makes you angry? Think about that. Think about the injustice of what is happening now. This is where you get your energy from, but also the positive one. Where is your indignation? Let me check my time. So most policy documents, sorry for the graph, this is the public exposure, so this is in small groups, public, and this is the timeline. So very often, once you have data or policy papers or new socioeconomic studies showing that how many money is saved in the system if you treat patients with colon cancer earlier than later, this is just a technical document that is published in the Annals of Oncology or God knows where. As long as it remains among scientists and you, nothing will happen to it. So what you have to do is to move it up the public agenda. Try to find, even in technical aspects, something that has an emotional drive. Because otherwise it will remain a document on tables in rooms or on websites. You have to lift it out of these confined spaces and bring it to the public. Sorry?
Of this table, because most of the people think you have to show statistics.
Yes.
But it's the how you show it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
different.
Yes, and that is why this is a campaign slogan from Greenpeace. And I like it because it's very telling. Greenpeace uses this equation to evaluate which campaigns they're going to put money in and when they brainstorm about what to do. And so they say a scandal is awfulness of something, times what can be done and what is being done about it, times the immoral profit generated from it. So something is awful, like killing baby seals with baseball bats. That's awful. Can something be done about it? Yes, something can be done. Is something being done about it? No, nothing is being done about it. And people are making profit from that or saving money from that. So why do I like it? Because it has the equation of, it's awful that people are dying. Sorry for the bottom line. It says what is being done about it. So, and this equation is different, is important. A lot can be done, but it's not being done. And that is shameful, knowing that it impacts the lives of so many people. That's where we have to move forward. So campaign, again, the type is a little bit, get your share of voice, keep hammering on the same nail. So keep saying it again and again and again and again, never stop, repackage it, change a little bit of the wording, change a little bit of the format, but keep saying the same thing. And be where the action is. Make sure that you show up, that your voice is heard on places where politicians are. Stand up, ask your question, make sure you put pressure on the system. Ask journalists, brief journalists, make sure they ask also the right questions. Go to members of parliament in the opposition, ask them to ask questions to the residing Minister of Public Health if they don't listen to you. And that's what you have to do in a campaign plan, is make sure, so these are people who are in favor of you, people who are against you, and these are the number of people, so a typical bell curve. I mean, your campaign plan is to move things forward, so they have the majority of the people on your side. The people understand, yes, this is what we want. We can relate to that goal, we want that to happen. So, and just a few examples, we're doing that now with the Colon Cancer Association, so roadmaps where we look at all the topics that we need to identify and how we will translate it into action. I mean, we made the analysis. If today, so even without any new drugs or without new types of surgery or without anything else, if every country in the European Union had the same best practice as the leading country, 110,000 people would not die every year, which is huge. Yeah? So these are people who are dying somewhere, silently, nobody knows, and everybody thinks they've had the best possible treatment. No, they have not. And I think this is more people than in Camp Nou in Barcelona, every year. And that's because, you know, think about the equation from Greenpeace, what can be done about it and what is being done about it. What can be done about this is this, save these 110,000 every year. And it's not being done. I think that is where the indignation comes from. This is where we have to work and act. Look at colorectal cancer screening. Look at the differences in the different countries. There's a big difference. Some countries are very good, some countries are very bad. The result is people are dying needlessly because it's identified too late. These I mentioned earlier. So this is overall survival rate in stage 1 colon cancer versus stage 4. 3,800, so I was a little bit wrong with my figure, 40,000 in stage 4. So if you multiply that, these are the numbers of survivors on the total population, and this is the cost. So if you put all the people in here and you subtract this, you have 4 billion euro in savings. And if there would be no premature cancer deaths in Europe, 6 billion would be saved also from labor productivity. So that's 10 billion euro in positive gain. Yeah. This is an interesting calculation. I think this will make politicians think, especially because they always talk about the sustainability of the system. They say the system is in jeopardy. It's not. It's just that money is badly allocated. It's badly shared. We spend too much, we waste too much money. I mean, these are just try to crystallize in terms of messages to wake up politicians. In the UK, 3,300 colon cancer patients would be alive every year if they were treated like in Belgium. So the system in the UK has lower outcomes than Belgium. 3,300 people die every year in the UK because they were not treated like in Belgium. This will wake up a politician. In Amsterdam, colon cancer patients are 5 times more likely to die in the smallest hospital compared to the best, most specialized. Huge difference, factor 5. That's enormous. I know. It's the same in Belgium for rectum cancer, 8 times difference between the smallest and the biggest hospitals. It's a scandal. I mean, how is this possible that nobody knows about that? Because it means that your GP or your oncologist is willing to treat you knowing that he's not, or that she has not the best equipment and the best infrastructure and the number of surgery needed to do the best treatment. All public cancer investment, I use this often to politicians, all public cancer research in Europe amounts to 710 million euro compared to 5.4 billion euro in the US. So if we have innovations, we have to rely on what's being done in the United States, including European companies like Roche, Novartis, and others, because they get their research from there. So if Europe says, I'm not willing to pay because I already paid for the research, don't believe them. They don't invest in research. Carlos Moedas, the Portuguese commissioner for research, was very happy to say that he would double the amount of money in Horizon 2020 in the new framework. He's doubling it from 30 to 60 million, which is good, we're fantastic, but it's still only 60 million. Look what the United States is investing. And then be in the press. Make sure that you have a strong story. Cases, individual cases of individual patients are very important. And you can see, I mean, they're just so shameful. And look at the emotional things in the title. Outrage, outrage. Media is also emotion. Yeah? So think about lifting all these policy documents into the broader space. And then, of course, we already mentioned it, there's a timing. There's a timing of budgets. Every year, budget has to be approved in the parliaments. Make sure that you come with your proposal in time for budgets for next year. If you come in November, you're too late. Make sure it's by summertime, you already have a good plan, good interaction with politicians that they can integrate in their budget for the next one. Content cycle, health policy plans, parliamentary debates, other initiatives, and then the political cycle of elections. So these are the 3 cycles on which you have to base your discussions. And then make your planning. I think that's obvious. I will not go into that now. I mean, that is clear. You know, what presidencies we have in the European Union, that's not relevant on national year, but okay. Elections coming up next year at the European level, of course, will have an influence. And this is from our, these are all the cancer days and weeks, which are all good moments to communicate to politicians about. And then you have a number of techniques, I will not go into that. So, big picture, government affairs, think about very clear what you want to achieve, how to get there, think about the rational aspects and the emotional ones, and then be creative in what you can do and go for it. It sounds simple, it's very often exciting. It's not always exciting, especially if you get a no, but I think persistence is absolutely essential. So, thank you, and if you have questions, you can ask them now. Thank you.